Welcome to Marin Voices and Views. With Lawrence A. Strick, I'm Peter B. Collins. In our second segment today, we'll meet Andy Perry and Kim Bainish from the Marin Bicycle Coalition. There's a local controversy about rehabilitating the Alto Tunnel to ease bike traffic from Mill Valley to Corte Madera, and we'll also talk about making Marin County even more bike-friendly. Larry, introduce our first guest.
Our first guest tonight is Dr. Tom Peters. Dr. Peters is the CEO and president of the Marin Community Foundation. He's had that position for 12 years. Prior to that time, he was the director of Marin County's Health and Human Services, where he spent only 17 years. Before that, he was with the City and County of San Francisco's Public Health, and he's a former fellow of the National Institute of Health. Thanks for coming, Dr. Peters.
Thank you.
Dr. Peters, when we start out, can we hear a little bit about the history of your organization coming from the Buck Trust and how it's grown into the Marin Community Foundation, and a little bit about what's going on?
Yeah, short version is about 23 years ago there was some contention about the Buck Trust. It had been administered according to Dr. and Mrs. Buck's wishes by the San Francisco Foundation. They didn't think there was enough charitable need in Marin County, sought to break the will. Happily, luckily, there were some really strong community advocates and political advocates led by then chair of the board, Gary Giacomini, who fought that decision, and ultimately a court settlement agreed. So 23 years ago was formed the Marin Community Foundation. Simultaneous with that, we took over the administration of the Buck Trust. That time it was worth about $450 million. So we started with the one family trust. I'm happy to report that now we're up to well over 350 families, mostly in Marin and the Bay Area, but some even beyond that. We are worth about $1 billion in terms of pooled charitable assets. We give grants of about $50 to $60 million a year, about half of that here in Marin. The balance regionally, nationally, and even some internationally. So it's a coalition of families that have two characteristics. One, they've got the resources to share, and the second is that they've got the heart to do it.
So the Buck Trust money is earmarked for Marin County,
yes,
but these other family foundations and donor-advised funds don't have that same limitation?
That's right. We have, of the more than 350 funds, we have only two that have a geographic limitation, the Buck Trust and one other. And we honor that legacy of Dr. and Mrs. Buck. They had a passionate interest and support of the entire community of Marin. Some people have the mistaken impression that it was solely for the poor and needy or some kind of further restriction, but actually Dr. and Mrs. Buck, he a medical professor for many years, she a trained nurse, lived in Ross, raised their nephew there, and had a passionate involvement and interest and compassion for the whole community, environmental, middle class concerns, people who are not poor enough to be on any kind of government assistance, not rich enough to make their way through tough breaks, and really a very generous couple, needless to say.
Mm-hmm.
So the amalgamation of the various trusts that let you work in the county and outside of the county, right, is most of your work here in Marin, or what do you have a percentage?
No, as I say, about I would guess in total about 60% of our grant making is focused here in Marin. So that means that we're involved in education and poverty, environmental issues, affordable housing, other matters where we're really focusing the Buck Trust assets in particular. A number of our donors also are interested in similar areas, and so we make grants from their accounts in a similar way. But I think what's really interesting that most of our families are, I think, really earn the title world citizens. They are involved not only in giving of their time and their assets down the street and in their neighborhoods, but regionally, nationally, and as I said, for some around the world. We've helped build schools in India. We've bought an island off the southern tip of South America as part of an old forest restoration project. So it's a varied, interesting, fascinating, every day different.
Now, Tom, I'm a philanthropist without a fortune. For those who have been successful and fortunate, if somebody wanted to set up a new trust or a family foundation, how do they go about it? And how do you reach out or connect with them to get them involved in charitable giving?
Yeah. Well, the setting up of a fund is as easy, I think, but these days probably easier than setting up a checking account. It's a click away on the computer screen. It's a phone call away if that's your preference. We have a straightforward set of documents that helps just establish what your interests are, what your passions are. We have experts that, luckily not me, but my staff, who are really able to take a variety of different assets. Sometimes they're closely held stock, sometimes it's property, sometimes it's jewelry, other things that people want to contribute and really establish themselves. So that is simple, straightforward. It's a telephone call or a click of the mouse away.
And in the last few years with some of the well-known fortunes on the internet or say Pixar or Lucasfilm, have people stepped forward and has there been a new generation of philanthropists?
Remarkably. Actually, most of the families that are joining our network now are younger families, successful, many relatively recent. By that I mean within 10 or 15 years into Marin. By Marin standards, that's relatively recent.
So it's new old money.
Yes, new old. But you know, as I say, it's people bringing success from every field, every professional field you can think of. People moving to Marin who wouldn't want to, but they also have the heart to be involved in this kind of charitable activity.
And this enables those kinds of families or those people who are interested in being philanthropic to be on the cutting edge of a lot of issues because they're working together in a large group. For example, you guys, my understanding, have the Buck Center on the Aging and a stem cell research facility.
Right.
What's that, and what are you doing up there with that?
Yeah, that is the Buck Institute for Age Research up northern Nevada. IMPay designed research building, now being extended courtesy of the voters of California and their funding of stem cell research. Basic biomedical research center. I think I've got about 180 staff on the Hill doing some incredible science. They've really been at it now for about 10 years. A really striking level of peer-reviewed research papers contributing to the basic knowledge about the diseases and conditions of aging. We're thrilled with the development. It's an independent, freestanding research center, the only one of its kind in the country, that brings together a multidisciplinary team of scientists and their assistants and laboratories, really looking at the basic issues of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and cancer and other diseases that are formally classified as diseases of aging.
It's very exciting work. We also asked Mary Jane Burke, Marin County's Superintendent of Education, and she talks about a very interesting partnership with the Marin Community Foundation, a 5-year, $35 million program about closing the education gap.
Right.
Explain to our viewers what that program is aiming to do.
We're focusing, along with the best county superintendent of schools in the state of California, so we've got the luck of a terrific partner. We're zeroing in on a fact of life in this community, in communities across California, across the country, where there is a significant gap just underneath the fact that many students in Marin are among the best students in the state. But when you look just under that average or that modal standard, you find a lot of kids, primarily kids of color and kids from poorer families who are struggling mightily and whose preparation for school, both in terms of home life and just language skills and the fact that in many cases their parents are working 2 and 3 jobs just to make a break even, and many of those youngsters are struggling and not succeeding in school, not graduating from high school, obviously then not going on to college, and in the economy that we're in now and into the future, that's just not going to make it. And so we really want to celebrate the Marin kids that are doing well. We absolutely do. And we also want, though, to bring some extra resources so these youngsters and their families and the people attempting to help them really can concentrate some extra resources so that it's good not only for the youngsters in their academic performance, but we're very tied to the notion of looking into the future and saying, you know, these young people are absolutely critical in every way that you can think of to our future as a community.
You know, a lot of people, when they think of Marin, think of it as being a very, very wealthy county.
Yeah.
And we are blessed with a wonderful environment and many, many very great people who are doing great.
Yeah.
But there's also, like every other county in California, other people.
Yeah.
There's people with very significant needs. And what is your organization doing on a grassroots level to help out the safety net that's withering away based on cutbacks?
Well, one of our major areas of focus is on specifically looking to help families and individuals break the cycle of poverty, to get themselves out, not just out of this particular Great Recession, but you know, with younger folks, you gentlemen and I both know, they're going to face downturns in the future. So we're focusing on job training, on financial literacy, on setting aside assets for school and home ownership, or at least some degree of stability in housing. We're trying to make those kinds of inroads with 1,000 families, as a matter of fact, in Marin, who are struggling. The stereotype of Marin is so misleading because it's an average. You know, you hear the average income of Marin always is ranked as number one. When I was in my clinical training, one of my professors said, well, if you have a patient whose head is in the freezer and feet are on the stove, on average he feels okay. And it doesn't work in a community to have the kind of gap that we have, and we're looking to close that gap by assisting in every way that we can.
So we have these painful state budget cuts. The state has taken away $53 million from education funding in Marin. Just recently, the governor's line item veto slashed child care subsidy for working women. Mental health services are being shifted to the schools, but there's no funding to match that. So how do you manage the priorities with the largesse that you have at the Marin Community Foundation to try to help in the short term these critical needs while maintaining focus on issues like aging, which I think is certainly a very worthwhile long-term kind of project?
Well, I really appreciate your question, the balance of your question, because that's in fact a daily, monthly, annual challenge to address, at least as best we can, with resources that are considerable, but by no means in any position to make up for the topsy-turvy public policy decisions that are being made in Sacramento and Washington. We don't have those resources. But to balance the more immediate needs and shorter-term needs with this investment, you can tell by my remarks about education, breaking the cycle of poverty, job training, other efforts to really address these issues on a longer-term basis. So I appreciate the balance of your question. All I can say is that I've got a fantastic board of trustees and a fantastic staff, each of whom is trying to achieve that same balance. And we have great partners. Mary Jane is superintendent of schools, Dr. Larry Meredith as Health and Human Service Director, other members of the Board of Supervisors. So the way we do it is to try to be in very close contact with those public officials, and also, of course, a terrific cadre of nonprofit leadership that we have the benefit of having here in Marin.
Dr. Tom Peters, President and CEO of the Marin Community Foundation, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Appreciate the invitation.
Joining us now from the Marin County Bicycle Coalition, our Executive Director, Kim Bainish. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Outreach Coordinator and Advocacy Director, Andy Perry. Andy, welcome to our program.
Thank you so much.
There's a local controversy now over a plan that your group supports to rehabilitate the Alto Tunnel. And this is an old railroad tunnel between Mill Valley and Corte Madera. Now, it seems like a good idea, but the cost is estimated somewhere from $45 to $60 million. The the county has already spent about $225,000 on studies and planning. So how can we afford it, and do you have a plan to pay for it?
Well, a couple of things. One thing that's important regarding the cost is that the cost of this tunnel has very wide air margins. And the reason it has very wide air margins is because no one's been in that tunnel since the 80s. And so what we're looking for right now and what we're wanting to happen is for funds to be spent to get people or cameras or whatever it takes inside the tunnel in order to do a proper geotechnical study in order to determine what the actual costs are. The cost could be significantly lower than the air margins that what they've presented. So those numbers could be higher than they actually are, is one point. Regarding funding, regarding the value of the tunnel, we are living in a world right now where oil prices are expected to continue to increase overall over time, over the coming decades. We're living in a world where greenhouse gases are becoming more and more of a problem and something that we need to address. Transportation is a major sector and a major cause of greenhouse gas. In Marin County, it's something like 62%. So one of the things we are doing in our organization is trying to get people out of their cars and onto their bicycles. And by doing so, we're helping the environment, we're helping people to promote their own personal health, and by building this transportation infrastructure, which is the heart of what Marin County Bicycle Coalition is doing in terms of our advocacy, in order to move that forward, expensive projects are being built, and they're being built all over the place. In fact, there's 2 opening over the next couple of months in San Rafael.
Mm-hmm. And I think something important to realize about Marin County is we're very fortunate that our towns themselves happen to be very level, flat areas, but we're at a disadvantage because we have a lot of hills between them. So in order to really get between them easily and not need a vehicle, often we can take advantage of something that we already have, which is a railroad right-of-way, and that's the case with the Alto Tunnel. It's also the case with the Cal Park Hill Tunnel, which is a project that we're going to be celebrating the opening of on November 9th, and that's another state-of-the-art project that we have all to be very proud of, that is about a mile long from end to end with its approaches, and the tunnel will offer a 15-minute time savings for people going between the Larkspur Landing Shopping Center and Ferry into downtown San Rafael. So it's one of the things we have to deal with here in Marin, is getting between our communities and getting around or through the tunnels, and they can be expensive projects.
Mm-hmm. I noticed that there are 2 ways to get over that hill now. One is on the shoulder of the freeway, essentially on a small bike path that runs parallel. The other is going over Camino Alto, the hill, which seems like it's dangerous. Is a tunnel enough, or do we have to have a widening program for our streets regardless of what happens with this tunnel? And where are you at with that?
I mean, the Marin County Bicycle Coalition supports improvements on these other 2 routes. The one thing, though, that's really important to understand is the $25 million non-motorized transportation pilot program money that came to the County of Marin about 5 years ago had this primary purpose of showing, Marin is one of 4 communities nationwide, had the primary purpose of determining how we can get people to move from their cars to non-motorized transportation. By widening Camino Alto, more people aren't going to suddenly get on their bikes. Kids are not going to get on their bikes. Elderly people aren't going to get on their bikes and ride over that hill. It's a very windy, narrow, and I've never even ridden over it. It's a treacherous ride. And so by opening a flat route like the Alto Tunnel, and as we are going to see when the Cal Park Hill Tunnel opens, it's going to increase mode shift, and we're going to have a lot more people on bikes. And that's our goal, is to help people to shift from the car and all of the adverse effects that come with that, including air quality and traffic and stress and those kinds of things.
Now, Andy, I'm not a hardcore cyclist, but I have successfully negotiated Camino Alto, and it's
Lucky
a workout. It is a workout, but isn't that what most of the people on bikes are looking for, is a workout? Give me an idea of current traffic. How many people going that route are weekend enthusiasts in their spandex uniforms, and how many are people who use it because, say, they're riding to work from Mill Valley to the town center in Corte Madera?
Well, I can jump in on there. There's been studies shown, and this is nationwide, not just in Marin, because the trends are very similar, that it's a very small percentage, maybe 5% of people who are thoroughly devoted to bicycling in any condition, and those would be your real hardcore commuters. And then there's a much larger percentage, about 60% of the population, that are sort of this interested but concerned area. They would like to get out on their bicycle, but they have concerns about safety in particular. And so that's where the Bicycle Coalition is really trying to provide a complete countywide network, and we're getting really close to it. We have a couple of big projects to celebrate, and we've been removing gaps. But we are really designing a system that anybody can ride, because it's that majority of people who are interested but concerned who we want to get out on bikes. So it means providing safe facilities, it means giving them education, it means mapping out these facilities so they know how to get to them. So that's really what our goal has been, and that's why it's been so important to remove these gaps, because it's not easy for a mom and her 3 kids to ride over Camino Alto, and it's not even easy to go over the alternative route, which is Horse Hill. So we are trying to create facilities that will maximize the number of people who can get on these routes. And for the Cal Park Hill Tunnel, the estimate is that there'll be 1.8 million cyclists coming through that tunnel annually once it's open. So that's very exciting.
Marin seems to me be fairly bike friendly at this point. What I hear you describe is major gaps in the system where it could become much friendlier. Are there projects of a lesser magnitude, not a $25 million project, but modest public improvements that could be made that you guys are looking at, and where are those?
Well, we've done a lot of them already. That's what's really great. The Non-Motorized Transportation Pilot Program, which the Bicycle Coalition helped to get Marin designated as one of 4, brought $25 million into the county. And this was for our local jurisdictions to be able to build out various projects. This all came to be because years back, when we first started in 1998, we helped our communities create master bicycle ped plans. This is where we had them lay out what facilities did they want in what places. So there are definitely projects. There are bike lanes, there are bike routes, there's signage, there are share stencils. All of these things have been put in place, and you can see them in every community in Marin County. So the easy stuff was done first. We tackled the low-hanging fruit. And so of the non-motorized pilot program funds, which was about $25 million, 75% has been spent on construction. The remaining 25% is on education and planning projects. And that is actually how we got to fund this preliminary study for Alto Tunnel, specifically the $250,000. We have been trying to get more information about Alto for 10 years. And so not until we brought in this $25 million was there actually a source of funding to even look at it. And so now we're moving into phase 2. We've looked at it. The consultants actually compared Alto Tunnel and the 2 existing routes to see what are the pros and cons of each. And now we're going the next step and asking that we look even more closely at the tunnel itself, because there's too many unknowns. So the big price tag that's hanging out there is very unrealistic. Nobody knows if that's true or not. And we'll only know more if we can dig into it and really understand what are the issues at hand.
Has there been any consideration of a bike share program? I know at the Google campus, for example, you can hop on a bike, ride from one building to the next, and just leave it there. And it seems that in parts of Marin, this might be feasible, certainly because of the hills you described that separate some of the towns. It might not be county-wide, but for Novato or for the San Rafael area, is this something that you consider and that could be achievable?
Well, I would say we can look to Paris and their Vélib system, which was installed, I guess, about 2 years ago. And so there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that system. There's an awful lot of maintenance that has to happen on bicycles. You have to have a lot of infrastructure in the sense of bike parking facilities, ways and places to securely lock the bikes, track their usage, charge people for it. It's an expensive system, and they've got it down with a little slider card like a credit card. But there also needs to be a critical mass to make it really work. And I know San Francisco was very recently looking into this, and a proposal came forth with about 100 bicycles, which just seemed very small. So I would hesitate at this point anyway that any one of our little communities would really have enough bicycles to make this a viable solution. I'm not sure how the numbers would dial out, but you seem to need a critical mass of numbers of bikes to handle the maintenance that will be required. I mean, bikes get damaged, broken, they disappear, there's all kinds of other things, and maybe Andy, you have some other things to add.
I would just add to that the lack of bicycles I don't think is such a big issue, especially in wealthy Marin, and even for the people that aren't wealthy here, there's places like the Bicycle Works in San Anselmo where people can go in there, build a bike and take it home with them with just the cost of a membership, for example. And so bikes are easy to come by, and I think that what's really one of the most important factors is that we build safe infrastructure. A study just came out recently that showed that one of the biggest reasons that people aren't getting on bikes is because they're not comfortable with cars. And in fact, you know, I'm a perfect example of that. Before I started working with the Marin County Bicycle Coalition 4.5 years ago, I was very reluctant to ride on the roads. Now I've learned how to do that, and I feel comfortable and safe on the road. But it's important that people not only learn, but that the infrastructure is there. And when I have a choice of riding on a separated pathway or a class 3, which means essentially nothing but a few sharrows on the road, I choose a separated pathway every time because I feel most comfortable and most safe that way.
It's funny you mentioned critical mass because there does seem to be some sort of rivalry even at times between two-wheel people and four-wheel people. And in fact, in my job, I represent bicyclists occasionally. There's a prejudice against them. And a lot of people just get angry that there's people on two wheels taking up their space. What can we do in Marin to lower that hostility if it's out there and make the relationships between cars and bikes better?
There's a crazy irony there because every bicycle rider is a car driver and virtually many people that drive cars ride bikes. And I heard one day a person railing against bicyclists. And I went to talk to him afterwards. He says, I ride my bike, 15, 20 or so miles a day commuting over White Cell. And I said, each time you speak badly against bicycles, you create more rage and more anger toward bicyclists. And for me, there's a lot that needs to be done with respect to education. And we need to share the road. And share the road isn't something that bikes need to do with cars or cars need to do with bikes, so as car drivers need to do with bikes. It's an ethic of sharing that needs to happen from the heart. And people need to be more conscious on the road that the road is not owned by the cars. And California Vehicle Code said that. It's legally true, it's morally true, and we need to share a little bit more. And it's a little bit hard in our rushed world at times, but that's really the ethic that needs to be the predominant one.
And if I could add, the Bicycle Coalition has been implementing a Share the Road campaign where we are working to educate both drivers and cyclists of how to be sane and careful around each other. But this is a national problem, and we don't have all the solutions here.
Kim Banish and Andy Perry from the Marin County Bicycle Coalition, great to meet you. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you
so
very much.